Hi everybody, this is Josh with Josh Wright Piano TV. Today I will be presenting a concept. This video is dedicated to Jesslyn, who had requested that I present the concept of practice regimen and technique regimen, and how to balance those. This is a great question and there's no set answer, so you can apply this however you'd like, but I'll just give you some basic structure. If you're struggling with technique, or you're not quite at the very proficient level, I would, and what is proficient? You can define that as lots of different things. If your scales are not above 120 or 140 at 4 notes per click, your technique's not proficient yet. If your arpeggios are not really fluid and loose, your technique's not proficient. And if you can't do basic technical problems, your technique's not proficient. If you can't play thirds or octaves or sixths in fast progression, that doesn't necessarily mean that your technique is not proficient. It just means those are areas that you can work on, and this video wouldn't really apply to those people who are in that category, although I will give you some suggestions at the end if you are really proficient like that. The first thing I want to say is that scales, arpeggios, and chords are a bread and butter type daily exercise that you can do to strengthen your hands in several different ways. I find that scales really help with agility. They'll help you obviously with fast passages. Even if the passage is doing, scales will help prepare you for something like that. Arpeggios help you be super loose, and I've posted a video about arpeggios so you can look for specific ways to improve those. But if you're playing arpeggios like this, that's not good. You want to be really fluid. Okay, and I've addressed that in that video. The other thing that I would do each day is some type of chord. What that does is chords provide structure for your hands. So you could go through all the jazz chords, not all the jazz chords, all the basic seventh chords, sorry. All those jazzers are going to hate me out there for saying that. Okay, these are just what I teach intro to jazz with my students. This is a major 7 chord in inversions. Dominant 7, minor 7, oh wow, half diminished 7, and then fully diminished 7. You can do those hands together. If you're not quite that advanced yet, just do basic triads and inversions. A good place to start is major, minor, diminished, augmented, on those chords and inversions. An inversion basically just gives you the same chord and you put the bottom note on the top. So if you play a C major chord, C, E, G, put the C on the top. So it would be E, G, C. That's first inversion, put the E on the top. That's second inversion, put the G on top. You're back to root position. From major, you can go to minor by dropping the third. Minor, you can find a diminished triad by dropping the 5th. And then to find augmented, slide back to major, and then raise the 5th. Okay, chords give structure to your hands. They help strengthen your hands. And if you're really terrible at these, you can use this little cheater's trick where you slide a pencil, so put it over your thumb, underneath your second finger, over your third finger, underneath your fourth finger, and then over your pinky. And that can kind of help you get those root position chords if you're having trouble, even plunking out those basic chords. Okay, so those are good technique regimens: scales, arpeggios, triads. Do I like to start little tiny kids on triads? On scales? Not quite. I like to do that maybe after they can play things like a basic canon exercise. Because scales can be difficult because you cross over at different times. Okay, now I want to go on to some other possibilities. I'll make some quick suggestions of other technique books that you can use. List has an amazing collection of very difficult exercises. I own the book. I haven't gone through too many examples, but they're tough and they're great. Brahms has a lot of exercises. You can also look at Schmidt preparatory exercises, Wieck, W-I-E-C-K, and then Czerny. Czerny also was a master teacher who learned from Beethoven, and he has so much to offer in his exercises as well, musical concepts as well as basic technique. Okay, so those are some suggestions. And then if you're real advanced and you have fairly large hands, you don't need to have large hands for this, but I'm going to tell you it's easier and you want to stay loose. You can do the Philippe exercises for the independence of the fingers. I believe Philippe is spelled P-H-I-L-I-P-P. Basically, you go through all those, and then you do a series of holding certain notes down. And then you can do a legato. Those are tough. Even when I teach those, sometimes if my student's having trouble, I have to think about it before I demonstrate, because those can be really tough. That trains certain notes to hold down and really helps each finger to become its own entity. Okay, so once you have that, how do you structure a practice session? First of all, I find that many teachers focus way too much on technique or way too little. I think you need some technique each day. If you're a very advanced student, this is for you advanced students who are proficient, like I talked about at the beginning of the video, you can use your pieces as technique exercises. Sometimes your left hand will struggle, so you can make little things up along the way or do some supplemental exercises if it's mostly just your right hand. But if you're playing any of the Chopin etudes, you don't need to sit and do scales to warm up, because each of those etudes are going to do different things for your hands. Maybe if you're just playing the slow etudes, you do some scales. If you're playing any of the Liszt etudes or Rachmaninoff etudes, or it doesn't even have to be an etude. If you're playing the Chopin ballades, for instance, you can do so many things with the different passages in each of the codas or things like that. So if you're really advanced, look for ways to organize your practice into maybe a warm-up exercise using your piece. That's much more efficient. When I was about 15, I was pretty proficient. I still had so much to learn, and I still do, but I started using pieces when I was about 14 or 15 because I was working on all the Chopin etudes at that point, so that was fine. So, now that you know what to do with technique or have an idea of some possibilities, how do you divide your time? I'm going to divide into percentages today, and these are rough percentages. You don't need to do this, but I would say if I had 1 hour to practice each day, and I had 2 repertoire pieces and then technical exercises, I would spend 15 minutes tops, so a fourth of my practice, on technique, and then use 20 to 25 minutes on each piece. In other words, so according to which piece you need more help on, you can divide that, or you can divide it exactly. The reason I don't want to encourage students to spend a half hour or an hour on technique, if that's all they have, is you don't spark creativity in your mind just using technique, unless you're super diligent and you can come up with very creative ways of practicing your scales, and that works. You can spark creativity. But I notice I have this little boy. He's amazingly talented. I think he's 11, and he can play his scales at 152, 4 notes per click, and he's 11. Okay, that's really fast. That's a high tempo, especially for an 11-year-old kid. He can do it with all of them. But his reading has suffered a little bit. He's not quite as advanced of a reader. So I was saying, how do you practice? And he says, I usually spend an hour on my scales and arpeggios, and then I'll do an hour on my other pieces, which is admirable for an 11-year-old to be doing 2 hours a day. But I said, okay, let's scale back the technique to 20 minutes a day and give you an hour and 40 minutes. You can spend 20 to 30 minutes sight reading, and you can spend the other hour and however much extra you have on learning your pieces. And I've already noticed a little bit of change. We only did that 2 weeks ago, and he's already starting to become a better reader. So your practice regimen should really play to your weak areas while still covering all the bases. If any of you have any questions or would like to audition for private online lessons through Skype with me, my email is josh@joshwrightpiano.com. And I'd be happy to hear from you and answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining me today.